Hi. Today I want to talk about Lilith, Eve, and the evolution of mythology and how we use it in astrology today. So, have you heard of Lilith? You might be nodding your head. Yes, I know. We know who Lilith is. But let me just introduce her on my own. So in astrology, we talk about dark moon Lilith, black moon Lilith. We talk about this location that has movement, a very erratic and wild movement in your chart that is correlated to the moon and the ellipse of the moon around the earth. And the black moon Lilith is the spot that is furthest away from the earth on that elliptical. And I use the true black moon Lilith, which has that erratic movement. Often astrologers use the mean. Now, it also can be confused with the asteroid. There's an asteroid Lilith. That's a different thing, a different place. And I think it's important, actually, that black moon Lilith isn't an object. I like that Lilith is not an object, but rather a place in our chart because, like many things pointing towards the future, it isn't physicality we're aiming for. It's really this placement, this bringing something to where there is nothing now. For me, that's part of our evolution. So let's talk about Lilith, and especially let's talk about Lilith in that with the kind of open-heartedness and in the vein of understanding how she and the mythos around her, even the misunderstandings around her, are part of our evolution as we move towards the future of becoming more liberated and more energetically ourselves. So in our mythology or modern mythology, so for instance, when I was listening to my beloved teacher talking about Lilith, he shared the story that you were nodding your head, yes, I know who Lilith is. He shared the story that in Genesis, before God created Eve, he created Lilith the same way he created Adam, sculpted her from the earth. And he created Lilith as an equal to Adam. And then when the time came for them to lie together, as they say in the Bible, she refused to lie under him. I guess he also refused to lie under her. Anywho, but the story is about Lilith. And that she left, depending what story you read, or was kicked out, depending what story you read. And Adam actually even, he was bummed and he tried to get, God to get her back, and 3 angels were sent, and there's these nice stories. Now, everyone says, oh yeah, Lilith from Genesis. Unfortunately, she doesn't appear in Genesis, y'all. So in the codified Bible, so that's the Bible that we use, there is no direct mention of Lilith. You can Google, Lilith and Genesis, and it comes back with, she's mentioned in Isaiah 34:14, but she's not even mentioned by name. It's implied. And even then, it's still unclear, and different scholars think different things. So the story culminates with, after Lilith refused to come back to Adam, only then did God create Eve from his rib, this mere small portion of him, and therefore she is obedient and docile, submissive, all the things that Lilith was not. So that's the modern kind of story that we pass around. Now, in the 1970s, late 60s, this story really was lifted up by Jewish feminist academics. And it originates from the work in medieval times by Ben Sira. And he wrote what is usually referred to as a satire called The Alphabet, or Alphabet of. And it was one of the stories contained in it, along with lots of other, like Judaic stories, Jewish stories. So how the academics in the 70s lifted up, like, it's become a very valid archetype. We can't refuse the archetype because it's so widely understood and distributed in our work. However, I think it's worthwhile to explore deeper into it for several different reasons. Just first of all, like, it's not actually in Genesis, so stop saying that. But more than that, to not divorce us from some beautiful messages that we can actually understand through understanding the creation of Eve more esoterically, more generously. So the picture of Eve, how I've grown up with it in esoteric Christianity, is that God reached into the interior space of Adam and brought out part of his insides and created a whole being from his insides. And the story goes that actually this woman is part of how man experiences his own interior through being in relationship with women. And whether we are male or female, identify as whatever, a yin or yang, or a witch or a wizard, we can relate to how absolutely essential our relationships are on our path of self-knowledge, and how much we've gotten to know the secrets of our own insides through the meetings we have with other people. Now, what do we do about this in relationship to the Lilith in our astrological work? And I think this is where we really want to embrace this kind of like modern myths. So this picture, the modern myth, you could say, is an archetype of woman, the feminine character that was like suppressed, or any kind of element in you that was suppressed, repressed, pushed away by authorities when you were young, whether it's your school teachers or your parents. It was the thing that wasn't welcome about you in the social situations. And then later, usually in our biographies, the pattern is that after authority kind of reject that part of you, you actually do that rejection yourself. So maybe for you, there was a time in your life where you took something that first your parents had been like, no, and then later you were like, no. And then even later in your biography, as you've worked on your self-knowledge, as your relationships that you've met have helped you face your own interiors, that then later in life it can become an asset and a capacity and a power that you get to share and be more yourself with. This part of the Lilith archetype is so essential, and I don't think we should lose it. But when we update some of the stories, it can actually help us understand, why these stories have been made up. It's like, what do we need them for? Lilith, if you trace back, it really originates in ancient Sumeria and Babylonian times. That's where you really find these references to Lilitu, or Lilith, which is actually referring to demons. And you can see it on incantation bowls and ancient scripts. And these demons were the demons that were responsible for when men and women committed adultery, were seduced by someone, or when a baby went missing mysteriously or mysteriously died. The demons that were connected to that was Lilith, or the variations, and they were both male and female versions of this demon. So this ancient Middle Eastern origin isn't at all what we've been talking about when we often look at Lilith in the birth chart. But even if we do actually start to take up that more old story about it, like, okay, this is where your demon lives, think about how that also can really fit into the archetype. And isn't that so much of our job these days in our becoming, that we want to transmute these heavy, dark shadows, these demon qualities in ourselves, these overly selfish or overly sexual or overly grasping elements that consume us and feed on us, it feels like. Isn't it just as equally powerful to use that as our story? That in our kind of our capacity to connect to Eve, or this capacity to reflect, we can actually take this thing that early in our childhood others rejected in us, later we rejected in ourselves, and then now in our becoming fully mature adults, now we can use the fruits of that struggle, or the power that was suppressed with the darkness. Because often what kind of happens is when we suppress part of our shadow, we're suppressing, like we're putting energy in the wrong direction. So we can think of when we're trying to push down a shadow, like we have to keep our hand there, else it pops up. But if we go, oh, my shadow, oh, how can I love you more in such a way that you too can evolve and change? Then we have this liberated energy that we can be more powerful and more self-expressed and more decisively, creatively ourselves. So let's take this into, biography space. What story do you relate to in this way? How can it connect to your Lilith? So one very simple reading of my chart, I have Lilith in the second house in Aquarius. And you could say that Aquarius is often connected to uniqueness, individuality. And I remember as a child, being weird or being intense, or, there was often the thing that wasn't welcome. Being even self-expressed. I even had a teacher who would crumple up my painting because I said the wrong thing and throw it in the trash. I had all of these places that I felt suppressed were the places where I felt unique and creative and expressive and risked, going against the norm in some ways. And then there was a time in my life where I went to college and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be, I painted on my own every day, but I'm not going to be an artist. No, I'm going to be a surgeon because that's what smart people do. And I want people to know that I'm smart. So I really, I pursued it until, some choices, I just blew up that idea, which was actually liberating. And then later in life, I'm now understanding how much of an asset it is to be unique and to be weird. I love it. Here I am in Sweden, and I get to be a weirdo by smiling and talking about spirit and God. And it's become part of my superpower, so to say, talking about the taboo things. So that's just one example in my own biography where there was something that was really, for me, demonized, being strange and weird, that was not welcome. And then I didn't welcome it in myself. And it's only as my mature self that I can understand that that's actually part of what the world is begging for. So that would be a picture of this demon turning into the thing that plagued me, that, took my energy weight, turning into a source of my power and energy. So maybe that's another way that we can use this story and those stories around Lilith as a way to understand more of ourselves through our birth chart. So let me know. Subscribe, tell me what you think. So much love. Peace.